Okay, welcome back to Supreme Fuzzlers podcast on Venture Brothers. This is episode 5, Eeney, Meeny, Miney, Magic. It is an amazing episode today that we're going to be dealing with. It is the introduction of one of my favorite characters, one of the long-running side characters that truly, I can only think of 2 other characters that just popped in my head that's not, in my opinion, not a side character. I would still consider a side character by late game. Because you could honestly argue that 21 is a side character, in this season, but since he's essentially not a side character by season 2, I wouldn't consider him one. Anyways, this episode, obviously Eeney, Miney, Meeny, Miney, Magic, is going to be one of the better ones in my opinion. I truly, truly love this episode. I would highly recommend anyone who is just wanting to watch a Venture episode that may or may not be good, this is the episode to watch. This is definitely the one to get involved in. I remember this was one of the first episodes that I watched that really brought it home for me. That I was like, okay, this is a really good... I remember that I didn't like when it was early series. I kind of avoided the other episodes, even though I really did like this episode. And I kept watching this episode over and over and was like, okay, this is a great episode, but it's not really... I don't know if this show is really for me, because the only other thing I really had to go on was episodes 1, 2, and 3, if I recall by this. I assume I had seen the episodes prior to this episode, which if I had, I would have the innuendo episode from Careers in Science, which is just, unless I'm that type of boy, I'm not really into that shit when I was 13. And then, of course, the Dia dos Dangerous, which is a good episode, but another very violent. And again, I will have to admit, I was kind of a pussy early when I was younger. I was adverse to large violence and large horror and large blood that wasn't in a video game form. It wasn't until animes and, people getting their arms chopped off and shit in anime that I really got. I was like, oh, okay, blood can splatter everywhere, cartoony-like, and it's whatever. And that's the funny thing about Venture. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there. So let's get into this, though. We're starting with this episode here, episode 5. By the way, everyone, if anyone's keeping up, or for those who are keeping up, or who just want to see this review. All right, let's get into it. So it begins with Rusty's dream. Well, it begins with cutting into the Venture's compound, but it's Rusty's dream essentially. That's the first thing we get to see. Cut into the compound, go into Rusty's dream. Rusty is apparently having a nightmare that's similar to his first episode nightmare, or where he was in the kidneys thing, where he's getting or is choking. I'm uncertain about what's happening exactly, but he's in a womb, obviously, with another person, and it looks all evil and shit as he chokes this motherfucker out with his umbilical cord. Hardcore. Anyways, so that's how this episode starts. Then you go to Brock. Brock is dreaming too, having his own nightmare, intriguingly. Apparently both of them are having nightmares. And this nightmare that Brock's having is actually the more interesting of the two in this episode. He dreams... You see him in a football outfit, which Brock, he's obviously built for football. He seems that way. And a coach, or obviously an older man who he looks like a coach, is checking the pulse of a guy and, does the whole throat thing and, where, the dude's dead. And Brock's just standing there and, all fucking freaked out and shit. And that's kind of all they show us. But you can kind of gather what, and that's the weird thing. Because it's a dream, you're not sure, but assumably, based on, just TV, how TV works and storytelling, this would be a memory. So, based upon that, you were going to assume that's that. And so, we're just gonna say, yeah, it's a memory. Anyhow, then we cut to a real quick shot of this machine that has the Venture logo on it, a big V. Then it cuts straight up to Dean and Hank. They're fucking with the Ouija board, and they're asking it questions and stuff. Hank's like, "Stop pushing it," and Dean's like, "I'm pushing it." And just ask your question. And Dean's like, "Will I find true love You are such a massive wuss. And then that Ouija board fucking thing moves on its own, saying yes, which is intriguing. If you think about it, if anyone who knows the series, because I'm like, I don't know if that's true, or at the very least, it's not been true yet. Spoilers, but I mean, maybe. That's the other thing. It's like, it's ambiguous. That's what also what makes this show pretty good, though. There's some parts that you're like, he could have technically found true love. Did he, like, you know? It really depends on how you look at it, honestly. Anyway, so that happens. They're like, oh shit, they freak out. It goes back to that machine, which opens up, and a mysterious figure, fucking dressed as like a cliche warlock. Like, you look at him, and every time I've ever looked at him, although if you really inspect him, you're like, oh no, he's like more of a early 20th century fucking rich guy kind of look, with the ascot and the that kind of look, except for his cloak, which is most definitely a warlock type cloak. But yeah, so you see this guy walk out. He's like, he looks really crazy cool and weird. Helper comes out of nowhere and is like, the fuck, basically, I'm assuming. Like, where'd you come from? Fucking, he does a whole fucking points at it with his fingers shit, and it like magics it. Fucking turns off Helper, or breaks Helper rather. Goes to and walks through the living room, or wherever the fuck Hank and Dean is. Just walks right past them, and they're like, what the fuck? And then he just does a whole like Jedi mind trick thing of like straight up I can't remember, but there's a Star Wars part that happens where you're like, you just like drop your two fingers like up and then down, and then dude, two people dropped. Incredible. Anyways, so after he walks by them, we get the intro. Okay, and then after the intro, we get to Dean waking Rusty up regarding or the Dracula is how he describes him. Like, this guy walked through our living room, destroyed Helper with our magical Dracula powers, and knocked us out. But Rusty's like asleep, and he wakes Rusty up doing this. And fucking Rusty's like line here is one of the best in the series. Dean, and Dean's not looking at. I'm sorry, Rusty's not looking at Dean during this whole scene. So he's like, Dean, you better be on fire. You are standing there in flames, and I am the only one who can put you out. Because that is the only conceivable reason that you would wake me up like this. He just gets so angry about it and just so intense, and it's fucking great. The early showing of like how Rusty's kind of a bad dad is intriguing, because I often forget that the series really pushes that narrative, I guess is the way to say it, where, you know, Rusty is the one who is just kind of an asshole to his kids. Like, and so far, what's intriguing about early season of this is that so far, even though, the little bit we've seen of his dad is obviously his dad was not that good. In the Brisby episode, he used him as a test subject, and in the second episode, Careers in Science, he was definitely more of a, obviously standing over you. Like, the little bits they give of him, of Jonas, towards Rusty is pretty interesting. Like, I always imagined you standing over me. You've always been your adventure and all that crap. You have to be great and shit like that. And how everyone in that episode and in episode 4 with Brisby essentially only want Rusty for his father's work, as in a way. The cloning shit and the fucking Gargantua 1 are both Jonas projects that they need. They would rather use Jonas or Jonas's information for, rather than use Rusty at all, or even believe that Rusty can. In the Gargantua one, they were like, well, we have only no choice but to call the only Dr. Venture available. Whilst in the Brisby episode, he made it clear that he was looking for Jonas's notes, not necessarily Rusty himself. Anyways, sorry, I got off track there. After we do that whole scene with Rusty, we get Brock. Brock gets woken up by Hank, and fucking Brock just, because he was having that bad dream, and he's also a military man, he freaks out. He grabs Hank by the throat and then chokes him out like that, and fucking just wrecks him in that way. And then like, Hank gets undoes it, and Brock's like, you gotta not sneak up on me like that, and Hank's like, sorry. Hey, Brock? Yeah, Hank? Is it okay if I cry? Some good episode. And then it has Rusty bringing Dean apparently to not a Dracula, a doctor who is renting out the arachnid facility from Rusty, and they apparently really need the money, as he says. So then they knock on the door. You get freaking one of the best characters. It probably, like, as I was saying, as a side character, number 2, a close toss-up for 2 or 1. Oh, man, there's a lot of great characters in this series. Even the small characters, but this character, so he introduces himself as Dr. Orpheus. I am known to everyone as Dr. Orpheus. So Rusty says, Dean thought my son thinks that you were in our house and you killed our robot. And fucking, okay, this line right here, that I'm about to read it pretty much verbatim, or say it verbatim, because I've never forgotten it. It is one of the best lines. It really shows this character's personality and is so fucking awesome. So, verbatim, basically, from what he said, if I remember correctly, he says, into the whole, you killed our robot, it's like, the fruit of your loins is quite astute. And, like, okay, sorry. The fruit of your loin is quite astute. I saved your mechanical man from certain damnation, for his frail and electronic eyes gazed upon the impenetrable. He was an unwilling beholder to the impossible. And then Rusty's like, told you there was a reason. Sorry, it's just... Oh my god. Okay, it's a great line. And it definitely is one of the better, showings of what, Orpheus is going to offer us in his coming days. His character is so, like, that line is truly the personification of his character. Except for whatever, the little bits that develop in the future. But basically, his character is that. He is a fucking weirdo. But a magic, obviously. As we're getting involved in this, you're obviously getting the gist that he is definitely magic. Which is not entirely surprising with the ultimate science abilities that we've seen. And we've already seen chupacabras and the whole cloning discussion, too. And there's been hints of higher science than the average bear. And also, obviously, the space station, too, of course. Gargantua 1, that's a good example. The fuck is episode 3? Oh, and Gardo in Home Insecurity. Wow, I can't believe I forgot that. That was a good example of also that this technology that is being utilized in these series is greater. And, of course, the pilot episode with the Ure. So, next we have Brock and Hank hanging out. Brock is doing push-ups like a badass that he is. Hank is going through Brock's tapes, which I love that this really, really shows the age of this show with tapes. Although they kind of write that in a way where Brock is just that type of motherfucker who just likes 70s stuff. Like, he's got the 69 Charger, he has a mullet, like has a Tennessee top hat kind of thing, whatever the hell. It's just he loves that culture and that thing. So it's just how he is, you could say. But in this, I would argue in this first little episode, it's because this is recorded and made in 2004, which means Brock, a whatever the fuck year old man, 30, whatever, would have been a early 70s boy, if not 60s. So it's actually in his lifetime that's a possibility. Anyways, so Hank starts asking him about a specific tape that he's like, can we listen to this? And Brock's like, no, I would rather, no. I kind of sold out on that one. That's basically, I think, what he says. Hank's like, you want to listen to it anyways? And Brock's like, I'd rather not. I have some memories attached to it. Is it because you killed some ninjas while you were listening to it? Like, Hank, I would like to drop this. It was a bunch of frogmen, some frogmen. It's a woman! The only woman I ever loved. You happy now? No. Because you snapped at me. Great lines. Great character development. And then, because right after that, you're alright, Hank. And pats him on the back and is like, you're alright. which is I love she's showing how the Brock Hank connection. Like this early showing that Brock and Hank are hanging out while Dean is with Rusty. It's really that's just showing this is the dynamic of the show, basically. The dynamic of the series. That these two characters are directly, like, the two boys go with these specific different men. And are obviously learning to be men more so from whichever respective person they've chosen to be, that they end up hanging out with. I don't know if chosen is the right word for it either. Because I don't know how much Dean would want to be with his dad, per se. I guess in this early episodes he really does, but it's hard to say. And then we go back to Dean and Rusty with Orpheus, and they're in Orpheus's little pad, which is a dope ass pad, obviously. And Rusty's like, I can't hardly recognize the place. I didn't know this place was zoned for a fire, though. And fucking Orpheus, God, his lines are so great. Like, the flames you see before you are no more than an illusion, or merely a symbol of the flame. Fucking just the way he reads and does his lines are just, chef's kiss, brilliant for this character. And Rusty, of course, is like, oh, I guess that's okay then. Alright. So, and Dr. Orpheus is like, which I forgot he actually introduces himself here, but whatever. He's known to many as Dr. Orpheus. He is to design and protect the elements of the cosmos. And fucking Rusty, they give out PhDs for that? Like, Kansas City or like New York City upstate or some shit that he says that he went to. Like, major in communications and minor in women's studies. But I assure you that my powers were given to me by more than a mere college professor. And Rusty's like, oh, of course, whatever. But this is a lab, right? When I file my taxes, I can call this a laboratory, And fucking Orpheus is just like, no, sir, you define the word to be a place to create abominations. I can hold back no longer. Your latest invention as evil. Yeah, and he's like, the latest invention has cleft the magical cosmos in twain. God. And yeah, and he's like, I can feel its evil grip pulling me back in. And Dean like, told you so. That told you so as in told you that he was in our house. And then Brocken is doing pull-ups and shit with Hank now. And Hank is doing this cool ass stacking thing on his elbow with coins. And they're talking about how, like, fucking they gotta repair a helper, and how scuba is a funny word. Say scuba. Scuba. It's a pretty decent scene here because it's Hank talking about how, like, his dad doesn't have much time for him and Dean usually. And then he kind of, like, is, like, say scuba right after that, and then Brock throws a coin back at him and is like, start at the bottom and work your way up. Like, it's a decent little bit of scenes here. So, sorry. After that, after the Brock scene, we go back to Rusty and Orpheus is like, man cannot be blamed for his ignorance, but once he knows, and then Triana shows up, like, which is Orpheus's daughter, and they introduce Orpheus's daughter, and he's like, why don't you see if Dean, his name is Dean, wants to go and have some of those delicious puddings of yours. And it's just, oh man, Orpheus is such an interesting character. So they take Dean, and then fucking the cat rubs on Rusty, and Rusty's like, oh, she's an affectionate one. Like, oh, I'm sorry, she's in heat. Fucking Rusty, like, I heard if you take a Q-tip and moisten it with warm water, I think you're supposed to put it in, And fucking Orpheus like, oh, I did that once, and I couldn't look at her for a week. It was horrible. And then fucking Rusty, like, that's not your wife in some animal form. And fucking Orpheus is like, no, my wife left me for a young necromancer. Rusty also mentions that he's a single parent. Now we think we got something in common. Orpheus also mentions that the cat was just a walking reminder of our common shame. And then we have Dean being like, is your name Pumpkin? Like, no, it's Triana. Doesn't your dad have a nickname for you? Dean, like, I think you've heard him call me Dave or Don a few times, but I don't think that's a nickname per se. Fucking so sad and brutal. And it's like, it's so fucking, like, I feel really bad for Dean a lot of times. You feel for him in these situations and what his problems are. And then he's asked her if she's a pirate, and it's like, and also goes off about how, because he's got a Jolly Roger on her blouse. Then he goes off about how my family was captured by pirates once. And fucking Triana's like, did you just say blouse? I don't know. Fucking, who's that big guy washing your car, though? Is Triana asked him, and he's like, oh, that's Brock. Yeah, at one time I saw a guy kill a guy with his sock full of party snaps. Did the guy's head explode? Yes, it did. And he looks like he's just fucking had the greatest thing ever. And then it goes back to Orpheus and Rusty talking about how you fit a staircase behind this bookcase. Stairway behind the bookcase. I don't know how. And then he's like, when I pull this candle, will it get wax on my carpet? Yes. It's so fun. And then they go back to Triana and Dean. And Dean's like, Triana's like, I gotta go because I gotta go to school. And Rusty's like, yeah, I saw you. Oh, sorry, Dean, wow. Saw your lunch pail. It's not a lunch pail. Like, sorry. Oh, okay, lunch box. It's not what I meant. It's kind of a purse. I don't know. And then Triana asks, why don't I see you at school? Like, well, I go to school in a box that my pop made. Sometimes it gets really hot in the box when my pop made. Crap, did I upset you? Fucking Triana. It's so, like, goddamn. You really do. These are the episodes that start building upon, like, the traumas and issues of being a character or a person who consistently just lives in their own, like, this world that doesn't necessarily fit the confines of any other situation usually. So because of this, you have the way he is, where you get, because after he's like, did I upset you, fucking Dean just goes off about how, like, penguins have a organ right over their left eye that can convert salt water into fresh water. And it's like, okay, Dean, I hope you're all right there. So next we have Brock repairing Helper, with Hank, and then he's like, I don't know why anyone would do this to Helper, and then he asks Hank to go get a Phillips head screwdriver, which as he's going to go get one, Hank sees the machine that's been doing these things that Orpheus talked about, and it opens up, and he's like, it's opened up, and Brock's like, it's the one on the top, and then he goes towards the machine, and then the machine, like, you look inside, and he's like, it smells like pretty flowers, and you look inside, and there's Rusty fucking throwing around a football, and he's like, come on, son, let's go toss the pigskin around. You hear a woman's voice, and he's like, oh, that's your mother. She got grilled cheese sandwiches for us. And, son, they got no crust. It's a very, like, sad but interesting quick scene that talks about this. And then, before Hank goes in, Brock notices it, jumps over the table, throws Hank away, grabs an item to destroy the machine, looks inside, though, so he hesitates, stops, puts down the thing he's going to destroy the machine with, and goes inside. And Brock goes inside and sees it's one of those weird parts where a deaf guy who had been killed apparently by him was explaining that he should have just given the ball to him, and that it was okay that he was killed by Brock basically. And then after that, ninjas show up, and Brock's like, brings out his knife, like, yeah. It's a showing of what Brock really super wants in his heart, and it's an interesting little tidbit of this. So then we get back to Rusty, who's like, oh, it's already past noon, let's go, why don't we, Dr. Dads, go over to our lab and see what's going on with my machine. And Orpheus is like, oh yes, that's a great idea, but first, there's something I must do. And he does this whole, like, glowy magical eye thing towards the skull. Skull opens up, and you're like, oh, okay. And then he presses a button, and he ends up leaving a message for his daughter, and is like, I have to go write the torn fabric of time itself. There are 4 puddings in the fridge. You may enjoy the contents of one. Dinner at 6. Just such an interesting, freaking crazy-ass character here. Gosh, it's so interesting. And then, like, as they're leaving, like, they do a whole, like, staying on the door real quick. And then and Orpheus comes back and is like, no, I told you, it was unlocked. So, and then it goes to freaking Dean, who is playing around, like, with the crown and shit. And doing kissing practice, basically. And being like, oh, no. And pretending that Triana's his hand. Is like, what will the caveman do to us? Hush, my darling. I will take care of it. And then they make out afterwards for some fucking reason. It's so weird. And then you have you go back to Brock's dream, or desires, if you want to say, in the Joy Can, or whatever the hell it's called. I think it is Joy Can, is what we end up calling it. And he's like, got a freaking, like, monster he's fighting, a cowboy on a T-Rex, I think, and it's a polar bear with assault rifles and crazy shit with the ninjas, and Brock's in a fucking Indian outfit. It's insane. I mean, Native American outfit. It's so insane. And Brock throws a guy at the T-Rex, and the T-Rex catches it in his mouth and eats it, and then the dude on the fucking T-Rex throws a flamethrower. Super cool thing. And then Rusty now has Orpheus at the lab and is talking about his machine and is like, it's the Joy Can. I have bingo. It's great. Whatever your desire, you got it. You have freed an iron cylinder of unearthly delights. I love Orpheus. Don't think I haven't noticed all the green craziness. I need a touch of pizzazz, and people need a bit of venture love, okay, basically is what he says. And Orpheus does admit, like, I'm impressed with your abilities. I just feel there's more to this than you're telling me, is all. Evil has struck the house of venture. I want everyone to be clear. Nay, although I have smelt it, that over there has dealt it. And then he trips over Hank, fucking Orpheus. So funny. And they get into a weird argument with Hank and Rusty, because Hank's like, oh my god, I need to tell you about something. But Rusty's like, no, you can't get all acting out with company. And he's such a fucking weird dad in these episodes. But yeah, he gets all weird about it, and is like, you give them an inch and they'll think they own the place, and tells Hank to march away. And it's just such a weird little part there, but it's so funny with Orpheus's beginning. And then we get Brock in the Joy Can again, and he's like got a fucking mountain of bodies, and a bunch of ninjas and bodies are flying everywhere. And Brock's like, okay, I get it already. And then they all fly away, and he gets a suit, and fucking Molotov comes out of it on a bed, and he's like, Brock Sampson, you dog. Molotov cocktease, you bitch. And then she, like, jumps on his head and starts bonking it, like, hitting his head with, like a fucking child, basically, while he walks towards the bed. Fine stuff. And it's interesting to see, like, this is what Brock truly wants. They really do make it seem obvious that he wants Molotov in these episodes here. Intriguing as fuck as an episode, and also great character development, really. So, and then we get back to Dean and Hank, who Dean gets up too fast, apparently, and was like, he had a total head rush and fell over. And then they are talking about how, like, Orpheus isn't a warlock, he's actually a necromancer. And he's got a daughter, Triana, which is a cool name. Like, Dean, that's great, I can't wait to hear all about her. But we have a problem. Brock is in trouble inside the Joy Can. Like, I dare you, inside more Rusty's invention. And he's like, I dare you to make less sense. Like, I heard it all while I was on the ground, because apparently he was awake during that whole conversation Orpheus and Rusty had. And he was like, we gotta go save Brock, yeah. And then we get back to Brock, who is with Molotov, and Molotov's like, I'm ready, Brock Sampson, I'm ready to go all the way. No way. Like, but promise me one thing. Promise you won't be gentle. It's so fucking intense. It is interesting to see truly the greatest desires of a person you could argue is the greatest man of all time, and fucking, at least in the series of Venture Brothers, the most powerful and most dangerous of all people and fucking everything. He's just insanely OP. It's amazing. And then we have, so Orpheus is like, I am not Rusty is like, I don't know how they got in there, and I didn't, like, ask him to do it. And Orpheus is like, yes, no, the machine apparently just beckoned to Mr. Sampson himself. but I just don't understand why you had to put the lock in the inside. Like, Rose, like, that's kind of hanky-panky, you know? I'm telling you, that was designed for hanky-panky. Like, yeah, but, like, you know, the kind of hanky-panky you don't want someone walking in and be like, hey, Rusty, I'm just here for my shirt, or whatever. Oh, okay, I get it. You want another brew? Okay. Fucking, they're just such good acting and such intriguing characters. And then you have, Hank and Dean are, fucking have, aluminum foil hats on, which actually is genius, apparently. Apparently that's, like, exactly what you needed to do to not get this shit to fuck with you. But, essentially, they're like, we're gonna go do with this, even though Dean does point out, like, why don't we just get Dad? And, like, Hank, like, dude, don't you know? Like, he'll say we have super cool and are really awesome and they need bumper cars and stuff. And it's just so funny how, like, they really want to prove themselves to be older and better than what Rusty considers them. Because that's truly one of the long-standing issues the series portrays, is that the growing and coming of age of his sons is hard to deal with as a father and to truly come to terms with, and specifically come to terms with what type of person your sons are becoming in regards to what they want to do and what they want to become and what kind of person they are. And this is obviously because they're 15, 16 here. There's definitely a push from Rusty to try to make sure they don't become either like him or like his father, Jonas. And it's interesting to see this and being reflected in the way Hank and Dean act. Essentially, the way they act to try to seem more adult is because Rusty just doesn't acknowledge the growths that they are having. It doesn't help that they are indeed super fucking naive and super fucking just do not understand a damn thing about the world and the real world. Despite being, you know, Dean obviously a genius and Hank obviously knowing more about, like, battle and murder than an average person. So, sorry about the ums there. So then we get into fucking Dean and Hank go inside and they see Brock assumably having sex. I'm not sure. His motions are weird in that little event right there. Scamp, their dog, shows up, which if you remember the pilot episode, Scamp most likely died based upon what Rusty was doing to the dog. Anyways, and then Scamp, like, jumps through Hank, which is really creepy, and they're like, okay, we're getting out of here, and then the door's gone. They're like, what the hell? It's so fucking funny. And then it cuts to Rusty, and Rusty's like, how the hell do they keep getting in there? And fucking Orpheus is like, no, it needs more. It hungers. It wants more. It needs purity. It craves purity. What the hell is this thing made of? Nothing. Come on. Alright, I used some unorthodox parts. Name me one. An orphan. A what? A little orphan boy? An orphan? Like, it's so great because Orpheus is right. Like, it's powered by a forsaken child. Maybe I didn't use the whole thing, so maybe a little, you know. I just, you know, God, Rusty. And it's great because also Orpheus is like, I don't get how they can get the door open though. And then they do this whole sequence where you see what Orpheus can do. And Orpheus does the whole chant like, by the crimson horde of Lord Bataseat, I command you to open. And with that, you see, like, fucking, like, everything opens. And, like, honestly, also things turn on. Like, Hellberg, who's all broken, turns on. And it's really crazy in a good showing of, like, Orpheus has real magic abilities. And then, so and it goes back to Hank and Dean are like, how are we gonna get Brock out of this mind control shit that's happening? And like, okay, we gotta get he takes off his shirt and he's like, we gotta get this soaking wet. And Hank like, how? And Dean, dude, how do you think? Then it has Triana coming home and listening to the message that Orpheus left, obviously to learn where they are. And then Orpheus is seen talking about, and then the Marco with his eyes outstretched and his eyes blind to Polo begins to cry his name. And fucking Rusty like, oh my god, fine, just do it, try it. And fucking Orpheus, okay, Marco. It's so funny. And then it has Brock, who has a obviously pissed on fucking head band or head thingy now because of them, and he's like, good work, boys, nice plan. And they're like, oh, we totally screwed up. And he's like, actually no, you did pretty well, it's just I wish you would have thought it out a little more. And then they hear the Marco and they start going Polo, like so they obviously can hear each other. And even Rusty's like, okay, we know they're in there, okay. And then they have Triana, who is like sitting waiting for dinner, and obviously apparently it's all much past 6. And so she's all impatient and is like, okay, I'm gonna go check it out. I think it's fucking like 7 is what it shows. And then it shows Brock trying to break in out down the door, but that's not gonna work, obviously. And then it goes back to Dean. He goes and hugs Dean, and Dean's like, this sucks. And now I'm starting to get hungry. And then a pie appears right in front of them, and fucking Hank is like, do not eat it. That is a poisonous magic pie. And then it goes back to Rusty and Orpheus is like, be cross with them. And Rusty going like, boys, this is your father, come out here right now, and all that crap. And Orpheus is like, oh, screw it, it's not working. I don't understand. The true love thing always works. It's like my shtick, you know? So, and then Triana appears and is like, your dinner would be freezing cold by now if you had cooked it. And basically, not like that, but like, what the hell, what's going on, basically. And they're like, well, we're trying to fix Rusty's invention and all that crap, and he got his family trapped in there. Rusty like, yeah, did not. And like Dean and the rest of them, and Triana's like, who? And like, you remember Dean, right? Oh, that's right, Dean. And after she says his name, fucking Dean gets shot through the heart inside of there, and is like, I know how to get out. And they figure their way out, and it's so weird. After they get out, also, they go like, go Team Venture. And fucking Orpheus is like, yes, go Team Venture. And Rusty like, please don't encourage them. Oh my god. And then fucking Orpheus is like, okay, I'm going to send this machine now back to the hell it came from. And Rusty like, no, this is going to make me a mint. Like, I am going to make so much money. And fucking Orpheus like, are you serious? It's powered by an orphan's forsaken heart. Okay, keep it down. And so he does a whole huge ass fucking energy blast, and it just shoots at it and destroys the machine. Dope ass fucking explosion, or like an implosion, honestly, if I right here. And Rusty, such an asshole, is like, I hope you know I have to raise your rent now. And then last scene is basically Dean talking to, well, not last scene, but last before the outro scene, is Dean talking to Triana and being like, I'm going to see you around the compound. Like, are you around the compound? The hell? And, like, are you David Koresh? I don't know who that is, personally, actually. But that's what she says. And he's like, no, I'm Dean. Dean Venture. That's not what I meant, but yeah, whatever. I'll be seeing you around the compound. And then Hank is like, smooth move. Like, she was eating out of your hands. You think? No. Hank's such a brutal, awesome brother there. And then, oh my god, and then the end is, after the outro, is Rusty fucking knocking on the bathroom and being like, Dean, you're taking too long, what are you doing? I'm trying to take a shower. And fucking Dean is just like, I'm practicing to be a boyfriend, Pop. Fucking Rusty like, never mind. So funny, so good. Alright, and that's the end of the episode there. I'm going to finish this up here, and like, comment, and subscribe if you are on the YouTube. Check me out on YouTube and Supreme Fuzzler if you guys like to. I also do some tweets at Fuzzler Supreme, at Fuzzler Supreme. I'm new to the whole social media. You can find this podcast, though, also on wherever you can find your podcast, usually. Apple Podcast, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, those places. And, thank you for watching, or listening, rather. And I will see you in the next podcast, which will be Ghosts in the Sargassum, which is one of the better, not one of the better, I'm sorry. All the episodes, basically from here on out, are great episodes. So please join me on them, as we will be getting through Season 1 as quickly as I possibly can. I'm hoping to get it done, I don't know, just as quickly as I can. And because I want to get to season 2, because season 2 really is where this series kicks off 100% more. And essentially every episode from season 2, episode 1 on, is an amazing episode, either with emotion or comedy or both. It is fucking amazing. Like, this show is on par with Futurama for me. That is the only animated show that I've watched that is comparable in terms of, like, it doesn't as much anymore because I've watched it so much, but this show used to make me cry so much in some of the finales that they have in some of the couple seasons they have. Anyways, thank you for joining me. This is Supreme Fuzzler. Have a good day. Goodbye. 40-minute episode. Whoa.